Judaism Overview. Demographic information. As of 2010, 14 million people in the world identify as Jewish, which is 0.2% of the global population. Israel is the only country with a Jewish majority. 5.6 million Jews call Israel home, and 76% of Israel's population identifies as Jewish. 5.7 million Jewish people live in the United States, mostly in New York and New Jersey. In the U.S. as a whole, 1.8% of the population identify as Jewish, and in California, 2% identify as Jewish. There are about 1.4 million Jews in Europe, chiefly in France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Russia. Looking at demographic trends can help us anticipate increases or decreases in a community's population. In the U.S., Jewish people tend to be older than the population as a whole. Immigration by Jews to the United States is similar to the national average, and Jewish Americans have a similar number of children compared to the U.S. average. Typically, a person becomes Jewish by birth. In Jewish tradition, anyone whose mother is Jewish is also considered Jewish. So Jewish Americans have less racial and ethnic diversity than the country as a whole. But between 2007 and 2020, the share of Black, Asian, Latino, and multiracial Jewish people increased from 5% to 8%. In terms of education, 60% of Jewish people have completed a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree, compared with 40% of the U.S. population as a whole. Central narrative. We have used Stephen Prothero's description of a religion's central narrative to describe in broad terms how people in a religious tradition understand their practice. Prothero uses 4 points to summarize a religion's narrative: the problem the religion seeks to address, the solution the religion offers, how people pursue the solution, and the exemplars who show people the way. Because of the variety among religions in the world, this general framework needs to be tailored to fit with each religion as we describe it. Judaism differs from many religions because it typically does not have missionary aspirations. Proselytizing is not typically a religious practice for Jews. Traditionally, a rabbi would discourage a person from converting to Judaism 3 times before working with them to support their goal of becoming Jewish. Because of this, Jewish people have not typically sought to address a universal audience or claim to offer religious guidance for all people. Judaism emerges as the religion of a specific people, so we will rephrase Prothero's questions to focus on the experiences of the Jewish people. What is the central challenge of the Jewish people? How do religious Jews aim to respond to this challenge? How do they pursue this aim? Who serves as an exemplar to show people the way? Prothero builds on the thought of Jacob Neusner, a Jewish studies scholar and author of hundreds of books. Neusner describes Judaism in terms of exile and return. This pattern, Neusner says, lies at the heart of the diverse expressions of Jewish religion and a lot of Jewish literature. From this perspective, Judaism seeks the religious aim of a return by remembering the narratives of the Jewish people and observing Torah's law as taught by the rabbis. Exile refers first to the Babylonian exile, the historical experience from which Jewish identity emerges. In 586 BCE, the Neo-Babylonians conquered the kingdom of Judah and deport the society's leaders and upper-class members to Babylon. During their time in Babylon, the people of Judah reformed their religion. Before the exile, Judah's religion focused on ritual sacrifice by priests in the national temple. In Babylon, the people develop a religious practice that focuses on remembering stories and observing law. These practices give space for a new form of religious leadership. Rabbis teach Torah and lead prayer in a local synagogue. After the Persian king Cyrus defeats the Neo-Babylonians in 539 BCE, the people receive permission to return to their home country. They rebuild Jerusalem, and by 515 BCE, restore ritual sacrifice at the Second Jerusalem Temple. The people who had experienced the Babylonian exile and return, and their descendants, are called Jews from this point forward. During the Babylonian exile, the people collect and edit the writings that become the Jewish Torah. The word Torah means law, and Torah does include several law codes. But the Torah also includes narratives. And at the heart of these narratives, we see the story of the Exodus from Egypt. The Exodus narrative of enslavement, escape, and return to the Promised Land resonates with the experiences of the Babylonian exile. Far too often in history, the Jewish people experience anti-Semitism, violence, oppression, displacement, murder, and massacre. So at several moments in Jewish history, Torah's narrative speaks directly to the fears, struggles, and hopes of the Jewish people. In addition, the narrative of exile and return serves as an allegory for the relationship between the Jewish people and their God. God establishes a covenant with the people. The people at times fail to keep up their end of the bargain and become estranged from God. Yet God calls the people back and restores the covenant. Prothero's questions offer a succinct summary of Judaism's central narrative. Religious Jews see exile as the central problem of the Jewish people. They seek return and pursue this goal by remembering Torah's narratives and observing Torah's laws. Though, as we will learn, Jewish people interpret these laws and observe them in different ways. Jewish rabbis serve as exemplars and teachers. Jewish people in the American religious landscape. When we compare the religious practices of American Jews with the United States as a whole, we see that Jewish people have different patterns of religious engagement. 29% of Jewish Americans say that religion is not too important or not at all important to them. In contrast, 22% of Americans overall say this. While 36% of Americans say they attend religious services weekly or more often, 19% of American Jews say this. 62% of American Jews say they seldom or never pray. But among Americans in general, 23% say this. Compared with the American mainstream, Jewish people seem less religiously engaged. But we need to go beneath the surface to see more clearly what makes the American Jewish community distinct. Remember that Jews are one of the most highly educated ethnic groups in the United States. 60% have completed a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree. In contrast, 38% of all American adults have completed an undergraduate degree or higher. So it might be interesting to compare religious engagement among Jewish Americans with that of college graduates in general. When we look at the personal importance of religion, 29% of American Jews say that religion has little or no importance for them. And among American college graduates, this number is 28%. Though compared with college graduates, a smaller number of Jewish people consider their religion very important, 35%, than do college graduates as a whole, 47%. So educational attainment does not offer a complete explanation for differences in religious engagement among Jewish people. We also need to look at how Jewish people relate with their religious tradition and consider the manner of religious practice within this tradition. First, we need to remember that Jewishness involves more than Judaism. In other words, being Jewish means sharing a history, an identity, and a culture. For many Jews, this also means sharing a religion. But not all Jewish people practice a religion. Jewish identity includes the experiences of religiously observant Jews and the experiences of Jews with no religion. At times you may hear people call themselves secular Jews. This term can be used as a synonym for Jewish people who do not observe a religion, about 8% of American Jews. Sometimes sociologists use the term secular Jews to name the 32% of American Jewish people who do not affiliate with one of the major branches of Jewish religion or with one of the smaller Jewish religious movements. Some Jews also call themselves secular as a way of saying they integrate into the American cultural mainstream. For them, practicing Judaism does not mean standing apart from American culture. Compared with the American cultural mainstream, fewer Jewish people profess faith in God. This gives us another vantage point on the religious engagement of Jewish people. But it also tells us something about Jewish practice. A person can practice Jewish religion without professing faith in God. Judaism has not typically had a creed. Some rabbis have proposed creedal statements that summarize Jewish faith. But for most of Jewish history, participating in the Jewish religion involves remembering the narratives of Jewish tradition and observing Torah. The traditional prayer known as the Shema proclaims, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." For most Jewish people, this prayer is as close to a creed as you will find. Most observant Reformed Jews describe the religion as primarily ethical and not chiefly about a person's belief in God. Jewish people also tend to participate in religious services less regularly than most Americans. Again, this gives us information about the religious engagement of American Jews. However, this also tells us a little about the manner of religious practice for Jewish people in the U.S. It is common for observant Jews to attend services in a congregation several times a year, perhaps for the High Holy Days, to celebrate life cycle events with members of their family, such as naming ceremonies, bar mitzvahs, weddings, or funerals, and often as an annual memorial for a family member who has died. Much of the practice of Judaism can happen at home and in the context of daily life. In summary, 14 million people, 0.2% of the global population, identify as Jewish. Israel is the only country in the world with a Jewish majority. 5.6 million Jews live in Israel, 76% of Israel's population. And 5.7 million Jews live in the United States, 1.8% of the U.S. population. Jacob Neusner describes the movement from exile to return as the motivating dynamic of Jewish religious life. We can use this perspective to flesh out Judaism's religious narrative. Exile names the problem Jewish religion seeks to address. Return names the goal of religious practice. People pursue this end by remembering Jewish religious narratives, Haggadah, and observing Jewish religious law, Halakha. And rabbis teach Jewish people how to do this. American Jews have lower levels of religious engagement compared with Americans overall. In part, religious engagement by Jewish people tracks with higher levels of educational attainment. This trend also reminds us that Jewishness as an identity includes social and cultural dimensions that are not specifically religious. It also points to how the practice of Jewish religion differs from the practice of America's majority religion, Christianity.